Hey everyone, this is Christian Heimel, host of Press Row. Thanks so much for listening to the following broadcast, courtesy of Public House Media.
Hi, this is Emily.
This is Lindsay.
And this is Elizabeth,
co-hosts of Beauties and Headcanons here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Once you are done with this episode, we hope you'll come check out our show, Beauties and Headcanons, where we talk nerdy to you about fandoms, fan fiction, and all pop culture for nerds that you can think of. A new show comes out every Friday.
Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of Beauties and Headcanons. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
In 2014, Germany shocked the world by putting together one of the most talented and most dominant rosters in soccer history.
Götze! It's Mario Götze!
Argentina, they were so close, yet couldn't put it together when it most mattered. Now you've got an Argentina team that's hungry for revenge.
Messi! And Neymar couldn't stop it!
But what about England?
Pass to Rooney. Sturridge in the middle, there he is! Goal!
Or France?
And Sissoko! They're running riot!
Or Spain?
It's broken for Fabregas. Now it's Iniesta. This is it. That's the goal.
All 32 teams in this tournament are vying for the opportunity to hoist the World Cup trophy.
Still Gervinho. Oh, he's done it.
If you want to be a part of the action at Russia 2018, you're going to need your soccer passport, the World Cup edition. At Public House Media, we are excited to launch a new soccer podcast called Your Soccer Passport World Cup Edition. Come alongside hosts and fans and guests from around the world as we bring you all the action from the 2018 FIFA World Cup. Because who knows, anything can happen in the FIFA World Cup.
What about that? It's John Brooks!
So come on, grab your soccer passport and join us for all the action from Russia 2018.
A sensational volley!
Hello and welcome to Your Soccer Passport World Cup Edition. I'm Baxter Colburn. We've got a great edition of another Your Soccer Passport show in store for you today. Today, it is all about Group E. We do want to remind you, of course, that we are presented by Public House Media. Find them by going to thephmedia.com. You can also find their podcasts, including this one as well, too, on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, iHeartRadio, and wherever you listen to podcasts. As I mentioned, I am Baxter Colburn. I'm joined today by Marc Serber and by Brice Burge. Marc and Brice, great to have you back. We chatted a couple of short days ago about another preview. I know you guys have both been on with other shows as well, too, since that time. But welcome back to Your Soccer Passport, gentlemen.
Thank you. Great to be here.
It is awesome to be here. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Well, I feel like Group E has arguably one of the most talked about teams going into the World Cup. Of course, it's Brazil. Brazil has been doing their very best to just write history after that 7-1 humiliation, obviously, against Germany. That's really all anyone's taking and remembers from Brazil. Never you mind all the great plays that Neymar had, the David Luiz, amazing free kick he had against, it was Colombia, I believe. It just continuously well played, amazing Brazil soccer, just wiped off the face of the earth by that 7-1, just thrashing by Germany. How in the world does Brazil, in your opinion, Marc, recap and recount and just move forward with that still burning in the back of their minds?
You look at the squad, and I'd say, only half of them are survivors of that 7-1 thrashing, and you have a new coach, and Tite has come in and completely turned this team around. So, I think in a lot of ways they've already moved on. And in one way, to me, it's actually kind of a blessing in disguise because, you think about 2006, and not only were the players, I would say almost arrogant and overly cocky going into it, but, the media was just all over him, and they were even reporting on what Ronaldinho ate for breakfast. And, they flopped incredibly in that tournament.
Yep.
And, I haven't, been back to the pinnacle since that 2002 World Cup victory. And so you're going in now with a team that has high expectations based on their play, which is something that you don't always have. But when there's high expectations on Brazil, that's usually when they don't perform. But I think because of that 7-1 drubbing and because of what they went through 4 years ago on home soil, the media has been a lot tampered down. And I think that that's going to be huge for Brazil going into this, because when you've added Brazil being the team that everybody expects to win, plus that media over sensationalization, England as well, then that's where Brazil usually has their catastrophes. But I think that you look at the players who aren't there from 4 years ago, and there are players like David Luiz who, as you said, scored that great goal, but also went walkabouts and would totally lose his positioning, and the whole system would break down. And you don't have that with this squad. You have a team that's very well drilled, but also has a ton of talent and creativity. And this is the most excited I've been to watch Brazil, I would say even before going into the 2002 World Cup. I wasn't excited to watch them then as I am now.
Yeah, and I would concur with you on that one as well, too. This forward lineup for Brazil is downright ridiculous. You've got Neymar, you've got Gabriel Jesus, you've got Firmino, Tyson, you've got Douglas Costa as well, too. Those are 5 exceptionally talented gentlemen. We haven't even touched the midfield and the defense, obviously. Even the goalkeepers, I'm sure, could go and score a couple goals if they needed to. They're Brazilian soccer players. It's in their DNA to score goals, to make it look just absolutely beautiful. The Joga Bonito commercials from many years ago stick in my head, guys, of course, with all the fun that we saw in those commercials. But, Brice, looking at Brazil, is this the year that they finally hoist the trophy again after so many years of a drought?
It's possible. I think that this is probably their strongest squad since they did win it. I think the difference is that beforehand, with all of the qualifications and all of the tinkering and all of the different formations that we've seen from Brazil leading up to the World Cup, they can kind of get something off their back that Brazil, and I think France has to a point too now, because there's the beautiful game. And you even mentioned it yourself. The drive of the Brazilian national team, the Brazilian national fans, Brazilians, to make sure that they're not just winning, but they're winning with style and grace that transcends football and soccer into an art, is so toxic sometimes that it can really play off as such a negative to what this team can actually do. And instead of being happy with walking in with a 41-11 goals for to goals against in South American qualifying, where they won by 10 points, they're continually changing their format. They're bringing new things to life in every one of their offensive possessions. And they're using that diversity to really kind of break these trends of something that has been a monkey on their back when you have the media propping them up so much, or when you have star-powered names and their expectations rather to really drive this country forward. And so they're able to change some things up. They're being positive. They're being proactive. And I think that's something that we haven't seen Brazil bring to the World Cup the last couple of times that it's been had.
Yeah, I think you have to remember that under Dunga, they were everything opposite of Jogo Bonito.
Yes.
Quite the contrary, drab, boring, absolutely tough to watch. And then TJ's come in and he's bought in that spark, but just like Brice said, he's also bought in that efficiency, that ability to defend. And so they're starting to find that balance they need. You alluded to it earlier. How do they get over that 7-1? Well, guys like Gabriel Jesus, they weren't on the field for that. Right. Neymar, he got the pass because he, pretty much drove them almost single-handedly to the semifinals, and he was out, of course, because of the back injury suffered against Colombia. So I think you have a good amount of this team that Firmino, Coutinho as well, they're playing without that monkey. Maybe the monkey is there for some of them, and maybe we in the media play up that monkey. But, a guy like Gabriel Jesus who, moves to Manchester City at 19 and scores on his debut and looks like absolutely nothing phases him, I don't think he feels that.
Yes, and I would agree with that. And that's the great part about this Brazil squad, too, is you say, some of the reports I've read as well, too, is, Neymar is still struggling to be fully healthy, yada, yada, yada. Anytime you have a foot injury, yes, of course, that's going to be a concern. But I think it's wonderful because then you can just kind of flip it and say, oh, well, there's this guy named Firmino that's running rampant in the Premier League, and he happens to be on this team as well too. And if Neymar is healthy, well, yeah, of course, that's just an unbelievable 1-2 combination up top. But Firmino, I think, is capable of leading this team, and I think not too many people are giving him the respect I at least think he deserves.
Sorry, go ahead, Brice.
Well, when you get further along in the tournament, that's one of the things that I think you have to really determine, because that knocks out contenders from non-contenders that could just do damage in group play, is that you have depth in this Brazilian team, and it's not just a next man up philosophy. Using that creativity and that tinkering process so far has made sure that every single one of these players on this roster is efficient and ready to go in any kind of format. They're able to be moved in, and so it's very similar to like the New England Patriots, where you can throw any format you want out there. These guys are able to play in and excel where they're at, unlike Brazilian teams of the past, where you get some guys that have some card penalties or an injury, and now people are not playing a more natural position for them, and then they start to struggle or even throw a fit out on the pitch. And so that's something that this Brazilian team has done considerably different than ones in the past.
Yep, and I would agree with that as well too. Mark, you seem like you had a comment there before.
Oh, I think Brice cleared it quite nicely.
Fair enough. Okay, then, gentlemen. Any final thoughts on Brazil before we move on to the next one? I do want to mention I find we always talk about strengths and weaknesses on teams. I've seen this written in many publications, and I would concur with it as well too. One weakness that might end up plaguing Brazil is the ability that Marcelo and Dani Alves like to get forward, thus leaving them potentially susceptible to counterattacks if opposing teams attack it in the right way. If Marcelo and Alves are caught far up the field, you're potentially looking at one or two defenders back trying to defend the goal. If you get the right winger sprinting down the sideline, that could be lights out and a potentially dagger to the heart for a goal being scored. We saw Germany just completely exploit that, of course, 4 years ago. Who knows in this situation, but something to keep an eye on when it comes to the winger play. It's a great piece to have in your arsenal, but at the same time can also be one of your bigger downfalls at times as well, too. All right, go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to jump in there. The thing to think about that is that one thing that Brazil didn't have last time was a center defensive midfielder like Casemiro, who is used to having to stay back at times and clean up for Marcelo when he does go forward. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's one of the things that is different. Not only do they know each other from Real Madrid, but they have that understanding and can play that system where I think Casemiro, if he stays out of card trouble, because we've seen his propension to go into dangerous tackles, will be able to help clean up when Marcelo does get forward. Dani Alves actually is injured and is out for the tournament. And so it's going to be either Danilo or Fagner who will take his place. And both of them do like to get forward, but I don't think that they tend to get as far forward as Dani Alves does. So I think that even when the wingbacks do go up, Brazil will have the balance that they didn't have the last time around.
You're right, and that's my mistake on the Alves comment. Of course, I was reading the article that I was referencing was pre-Alves injury, so my apologies on that. But either way, this is why we keep Marc around. It keeps me in check, obviously. I'm just out here spewing random things. Watch out for that guy Pele. He'll be a good player this year. Anyway, no, just kidding.
Costa too.
Yes, exactly. Hey, I really think the U.S. can win their group this year. Anyway, too soon. All right. So, Brice, let's talk about the Swiss. Shaqiri, of course, scored one of the most breathtaking goals in the 2014. I keep wanting to call the Olympics for some reason. The 2014 World Cup. And unfortunately, the Swiss, as great as they are with their chocolates and their watches, is about all they're going to be able to boast after this tournament is said and done, in my opinion. I don't see the Swiss getting out of the group. Of course, they're a fun team to watch at times, and they kind of were that team you wanted to root for. I felt like in the 2014 World Cup, they're one of those Cinderella stories that were kind of surprising people a little bit. But I think it's a different story this year for the Swiss. What say you?
I think that's the case. I mean, ultimately, they do have some struggles up top in terms of like finding out who to really push up to get the ball to. But I mean, this is a diverse team, probably one of the more diverse teams that you'll see ever in a World Cup, with so many players with so many different national backgrounds that can provide flexible attacks through their depth. They've had a very strong middle attack that can create opportunities in unique ways that ultimately it's going to be interesting. It's a very blue collar team that a lot of people find boring.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's effective for multiple reasons, and I think there's a couple of blue collar teams that are in this group, and it's going to be very interesting to see how the Swiss can find a star.
Marc, what do you think about these Swiss gentlemen?
Yeah, in our Group C preview talking about Denmark, Brice said, what you see is what you're going to get.
Yeah.
And I feel that way about Switzerland. I feel like we know exactly what to expect from them. The only thing is every once in a while they do hold a team to zero. They do kind of, provide that shutout. I think in one tournament where they lost on penalties even, they went out of the tournament without conceding a goal. So they're that kind of team that can sneak one. For me, they're a very well-known commodity. They've got great players who play in the top leagues, but I still think that it all depends on whether Xherdan Shaqiri is at his very best. When he's at his best, he's absolutely tantalizing, and when he's not, he's very disappointing. And so I think you base it on Shaqiri and what does he bring to the table in this tournament, and Granit Xhaka and how does he man the Swiss midfield. At that same time, I am very excited to watch Breel Embolo, who's only 21 years old, but he's really exciting. I think this could be a tournament where he maybe breaks out and maybe is the reason that they might sneak a victory or two from the jaws of defeat.
We don't really realistically believe, though, that this Swiss team has it in their system to get out of the groups, though, do we?
Well, I don't know. It's a pretty popular opinion that the Swiss will. I mean, Yahoo has them with a 50% chance of getting out of the group. It's I know some have even had them higher just because so many people are so anti-CONCACAF right now that they don't think that Costa Rica is worth the time of day. So I mean, in terms of process of elimination, it's a very popular opinion that Switzerland will make it out of the group. And ultimately, I think, Switzerland makes it out of the group if they can be more disciplined than their counterparts. Maybe it comes down to a goal differential situation where they let in less goals than somebody else when they play Brazil. And that could be a situation where a boring team can really, truly grind out of the group.
Yeah, and that's true. That's very true. I mean, you look at this group, it's the possibilities, of course, and you can't obviously say, it's the World Cup, anything can happen. That's cliche, but it's so true, at the same time. So what that realistically looks like, do the Swiss have some magic in them? Yes, they absolutely do, and like you were mentioning as well, too, Marc, with some of those midfield talents, that can only take you so far, but at the same time, hey, anything is possible. Like you said, Costa Rica, Brice, as much as we understand them and respect them in CONCACAF here as United States soccer fans, we also know that they are susceptible to losing games as well, too. And Brazil could have some hangover as well, too, sometimes. If you catch, it's one goal makes the difference at times in this entire tournament. So I don't think they get out of the group because I'm going Team CONCACAF for Costa Rica and Brazil to get out. But who knows? Who absolutely knows? But let's go to CONCACAF. Marc, Costa Rica, the Ticos are a fun team. They really were surprising in 2014. But your thoughts, I'm seeing predictions, at least via ESPN, that are saying that they think they're going to at least get to the quarterfinals. Do you agree with that prediction and your thoughts?
Well, they made it all the way to the quarterfinals in 2014, and I think they're, as you said, a very fun team and exciting to watch. But take a look at the Belgium friendly today, and I think a lot of questions still have to be asked about their back line.
Yeah.
And this is not a team where I think they, as much talent as they have with the likes of Campbell and Ruiz, that this is not a team that will say, okay, well, you score 3, we're going to score 4. And so I think that's where they're going to run into trouble in this tournament. They needed Keylor Navas to be at his very best, and we know that despite everything that he has done in the last few years, he still can be susceptible to the odd mistake as well. So I think this is a Costa Rica team that definitely has that ability to get to second place in this group, but I think they're living on the edge right now.
looking at this Costa Rica team, we are familiar, for those that are MLS fans, I shouldn't say all the we, but there's a couple of MLS guys on this team. Kendall Watson is one, plays for Vancouver Whitecaps. He's a fun player to watch. But the name, of course, that many will be continuing to talk about is Keylor Navas, the goalkeeper for Real Madrid. And Brice, this team is, I think, going to win and die based off of Navas. Am I wrong to assume such a thing?
No. It's an interesting concept because that to me, I think, is the fail-safe. Right. Navas is the fail-safe in this regard because Costa Rica's big problem right now is that they struggle to control the upper midfield. They get caught back too many times, and they go from a 5-2-2-1 to a 5-4-1 real quickly. And if they can't emerge in the midfield with controlling the ball like they were able to successfully do multiple times during CONCACAF qualifying, then they can get caught back in between, and they put a bunch of real pressure on Navas to step up. It's like screening the goalie too many times because there's just so much traffic. Mm-hmm. And if they're able to expand that field and really use all aspects of the pitch, then I think then you're going to start being able to allow his skill set to really come forward. But it depends on what Costa Rica puts in front of them more than anything. And to say whether or not they're going to live or die by him is almost like it's almost too unfair to comment on it like that. But like, you're absolutely right in the way that it does come down to whether or not he excels in the situation that he's put in.
I think it's interesting, too, to note that, Brian Ruiz was a great player that we saw in 2014. He's back in the lineup once again as well, too. The projected starting 11 I'm looking at has them running a 5-4-1. With our commentary earlier, guys, I feel like they should be playing maybe 7 or 8 in the back, and maybe that still might not even help them, unfortunately. But, I mean, it's a cliche question to ask, but how do you solve a problem like bad defending? Mark your man and don't let him take a shot? Is it that simple?
I think it all depends on how tight can you be at the back, but at the same time, then how quickly can you break into the midfield? And just like Brice said, if you can't control the upper part of the midfield, then that's where things are going to break down, and that's where you're going to be caught, and that's where the openings are going to be on the counterattack for the other team when they win that ball in that area. So I think the big thing is fixing that midfield, as having that be the first line of defense. And, you talk about the cliche, while we're on cliches, that the best defense is offense. Well, a lot of times offense is also about what position are you in offensively so that when you lose the ball, you are immediately the first line of defense. And how does playing offensively make you better defensively the minute you lose the ball? And that's something that I think is going to be so important for Costa Rica. How can they attack and get forward and yet still be in the best position to win that ball back when they do lose it?
Right, exactly right, and that's going to be the big part of it as well, too. I mean, CONCACAF can do a lot in terms of really hardening a team and toughening them up, but as we all know, it can beat the crap out of a team as well, too, and kind of leave you just limping into a major competition. And I think that might show a little evident at times in certain games, whether it's Costa Rica or any of the other CONCACAF teams that qualified as well, too. So we'll see. We've got one more team to look at here as we are finishing up the Your Soccer Passport Group E preview, and it's a team that is, I think some people don't maybe realize this, but it's Serbia is the team that we're looking at, and this is a team that topped Group D in the UEFA qualifiers. That was intriguing. They confirmed it by beating Georgia 1-0 at home, but then they were relatively muted as they lost 3-2 to Austria just a couple of days earlier than that as well too. But anytime you top your group in qualifying, you must be doing something right, in my personal opinion. And I think overall, group winners have to be respected at the same time. However, when you look at the teams that they're playing in this group, there's some cheeky, tricky players here for Serbia, but I don't think they have enough firepower to match up with what they would have to get through, in my opinion, to at least get even to that second spot in the group. But Mark, how do you view this Serbian team?
I think that we just talked about a team where we're worried about their defense. And as you alluded to, that is not the case with Serbia. Probably one of the best defensive teams going in. Then you have players as well like Branislav Ivanovic and Alexander Kolarov, who can get forward extremely well, as we know, and Matic, who will be directing things in the midfield. So I think that this is a team that on their day can beat any of the Switzerlands and the Costa Ricas that are out there. And so this is a team that I think could very well steal second place. And a lot of it depends on whether or not their strikers come good. But the bottom line is that those first two lines behind them are very, very solid, and I think would be a tough game for any team in this tournament.
Interesting thought process. Brice, your thoughts?
I have a very different opinion of Serbia.
Okay.
I don't think that they're very good. It sounds a lot rougher than it is, but I mean, this is a team that just replaced their coach because they had internal fightings about whether to call up star players that are pretty young. This is a team that defensively has been solid, but at the front half of the offensive attack, none of these guys have played with each other before. In terms of whether or not these guys can move forward, you're almost having to rely on individual performances, and it reminds me almost of the Toronto Raptors in the ways that everybody individually goes off and they can do some interesting and fun things, and they'll be a fun team to watch. But when it comes time to the playoffs, they're going to be exceptionally bad, and I don't think they'll win a game. And to me, it's frustrating because I like these small European countries that are fighting and come from unique historical backgrounds, which is definitely in the case of Serbia. But in terms of whether or not they have the cohesiveness to fight against two teams that are very blue collar in Costa Rica and Switzerland that have to be disciplined to have a shot, and then also deal with Brazil. These are not the matchups that Serbia wanted to see. And the intangibles when looking at this group shows that Serbia would have been very, very well off in other groups, but not this one. And it's going to show, unfortunately, on scoreboard at the end of the game.
I think it's interesting, too. I love reading what the local media has to say, and this quote from a Serbian newspaper says, "Brazil is the world's most sophisticated selection and will be favored for first place in the group. It is realistic to expect the Eagles to fight for the second stage with the Costa Ricans and the Swiss." And that kind of echoes what Marc is saying. Obviously, Brice, you're kind of on that other camp saying don't even bother showing up to your 3 games because you're going to get run right out of the stadium.
I wouldn't say run right out of the stadium. It's just that, Serbia could make it out of different groups if they were in it. I mean, if they were in Group A, I would say, yeah, they'd be out, no problem. It's just that these are not the matchups that they need. It's almost like when you see the NCAA tournament and you see Butler in there as a 12 seed against a really good 5-seeded team, and Butler is going to win just because of the way that their matchup is. That's what plagues Serbia here, is that they don't have cohesiveness up front. They are going to, even though they've got a good defense, that they are put up in a spot where discipline and rebounds and possibilities for good blue-collar teams to come in there are very possible to steal a goal and win in a 1-0 if you have a bunch of sloppy play up front on your attacking side for the Serbians. And that's just unfortunately how it could go. Now, they could get their act together and pull it out and get second place. I'm not saying that that's not a possibility. I'm just saying that, man, if you're a Serbian fan, you got to be heartbroken by the two other teams that you're fighting against for that second spot, because they are so different in the wrong ways for your team.
Right. All right, guys, let's offer our group predictions here as we wrap up this edition of the Group E preview on Your Soccer Passport. Brice, let's start with you. What 2 teams make it out?
I'm going to go with Brazil and Switzerland, but Switzerland needs tiebreakers to win over Costa Rica.
Interesting. Marc?
I think history in a game that's played every 4 years is the worst possible thing you can use, but I'm going to use it anyways. And for me, it's that Costa Rica has come into every tournament, nobody expecting anything from them in 1990. They were able to get out of their group astonishingly, and then obviously 4 years ago, that quarterfinal run. So I say they're going to upset the 2 European teams and take second place behind Brazil.
I like it. I'm going to agree with that as well, too. By the way, Costa Rica, according to the Soccer Power Index, a 0.3% chance of winning the World Cup. That is tied with the 8th lowest. So the odds are certainly not in their favor yet. Who knows? Costa Rica and Brazil could certainly cause some magic, but Switzerland, of course, trying to find relevance. And, of course, you've got the Serbs hanging out as well, too. So we'll find out. But anyway, gentlemen, always a pleasure. Thanks for hanging out with me for another episode of the Your Soccer Passport World Cup edition. Final thoughts from you, Brice, before we let you run.
I think this has the potential to have some of the more interesting games, even though that we kind of talked about how boring, a Switzerland versus Costa Rica matchup could be. The two different styles and concepts when they play their other games against Brazil and Serbia for both those squads could really show some of those cool offense versus defensive minded matchups that we see in other sports that can really kind of show through. So I think there's going to be a lot of exciting games in this group.
And Marc, your thoughts, sir?
I'm going to end the show the way I began it. I am so excited to watch this Brazil team play, and I really hope that they come good, because if they come good and give us what they've been promising us throughout the qualifiers and their last friendlies going in this tournament, it is going to be a fun tournament to watch.
I agree. Gentlemen, always a pleasure, sirs. Thank you very much for your time. And if you enjoy the podcast, please keep listening to it. We are available on Apple Podcasts, on Public House Media. Go to thephmedia.com, and wherever you find your podcasts, we will be there for you. More episodes, more previews, and of course, once the tournament officially kicks off, we've got all the live reaction as well too for you as each game and each exciting goal, red card, and every controversial play that we'll be talking about for the next 4 years unfolds. I'm Baxter Colburn saying good night for Marc and for Brice. We'll see you next time on Your Soccer Passport. Thanks for listening.